Welcome to Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. My name is Mompoloki Lerumo. Our objective is to enthuse, inspire, energize, and empower entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of all stripes here in BW and beyond. We do so by inviting these entrepreneurs into our makeshift studio. Sometimes we call them to the restaurant, sometimes we go to our studio, and we ask them to share their experiential knowledge, their experiences and their expertise, and we ask them as many questions as we can, aimed at empowering you also as a viewer. Welcome to another beautiful episode of Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. I'm your host, Mompoloki Lerumo. As always, it's a thrill, a joy, and a pleasure to bring another entrepreneur, another business person, another expert to come and share information that enriches your life, especially on the entrepreneurial side of things. We always strive to bring impactful, life-changing business information right here in BW and across the region, really, because we've discovered that our viewership is across the region and even as far afield as America. And welcome if you're watching me from the US or the UK. We really appreciate the viewership. And don't forget to strike that subscribe button. We really need your support, guys. Can you introduce yourself, Mr. Rangaka?
Yes. Thank you for having me today. My name is Mphoentle Rangaka. I'm a qualified risk manager working right here in Gaborone in the financial sector, but more precisely specializing in wealth management. So I'll be here just to help you dissect more on what I do and how it's applicable to our industry here in Botswana.
Okay. Can you share your background academically or in terms of your vocational training?
Yeah, okay. My background in terms of what I studied, I have an honors degree in risk management and insurance. Currently, I'm doing my master's, and I also have a certificate in anti-money laundering.
Okay.
Yes.
And you've been in the field for how long?
I've been in the field for just over 3 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I've worked in operational risk management, but right now I'm more specifically working on compliance.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is the working definition that we can use to describe risk management?
Okay, the working definition that we can use, the text one that we were taught in school, is that risk management is the process of identifying, analyzing, and trying to combat the risk that an organization may face. Mm-hmm. But I think in the practical sense of things, I like to talk on risk management as being a way in which each and every person or an organization, in the sense that we're in right now, you are trying to predict the threats that you may face as an organization and try to minimize the impact of those threats before they manifest much further.
Okay.
Yes.
What are the key threats that we're talking about?
Okay. The key threats, as we know, can range from many sources. Yes, they can be people related, they can be environmentally related, they can be financially related or legal. Yes. So in an organization such as a bank or such as yourself, you're in the property industry, yes, there are an array of threats that you may face. You may find that maybe there's a level of competition that you have to face and have to make sure that what are the changes that you can do in order to make sure that you continue to stay afloat in the industry that you're working in. You can also face threats that are regulatory related. As you know, laws keep on changing each and every day. As the property sector, you have regulators that monitor each and everything that you do. As myself, working in the financial sector, we have our own regulators. So in a way, you have to make sure that everything that you do as a company is in line with those regulations so that you don't find yourself on the wrong side of the law. Mm-hmm. So those are the basic threats that a person may face or an organization may face.
To get the position that you are in, what are the key skills, what are the key competencies to become a risk manager?
The key skills, apart from having the academic qualifications, I would say you have to be a person who's extremely analytical, in the sense that as a risk manager, you have to make sense of a large amount of information on a daily basis. The second skill set is you have to make sure that you know all the regulatory requirements. You have to be of a legal mindset, if I may say. Yes, that's a requirement. But in general,
but not necessarily possessing legal training.
No, not necessarily. Although it helps to have it, yes, especially when you are working in compliance, because you are going to be dealing with a lot of regulation on a daily basis. You have to know your acts. You have to know all those parliamentary obligations that have been put upon our organizations. Yes, but I think I'll just say, in general, you have to be a person who has a thirst for knowledge.
Okay.
Yes.
Would you say that our organizations here in Botswana are alive to the importance of having a person with risk management skill embedded in them?
To be honest, I wouldn't say like across board all organizations fully acknowledge or appreciate what risk has to offer. Yes. What we see, what is currently happening now is because of the requirements that our government has set, especially in the financial sector, most organizations are required by law to have a compliance officer. But in terms of risk...
Which law is this? Can you help people understand?
Which law?
Yeah, compels people to have a risk management officer.
I'll be more specific in the industry that I work in. We are regulated by Mphoentle. The Mphoentle Act stipulates that each and every organization that is being regulated by Mphoentle has to have a compliance officer who is of sound mind, who possesses the qualifications that are necessary. Yes, and an organization that doesn't have a compliance officer can find itself on the wrong side of the law and be punishable. Yes.
In America, there's a big debate between Republicans and Democrats over regulation. In fact, some people joke and say when the Republicans come, they remove all the regulations. When the Democrats come, they tighten all the regulations and bring more regulation. And it's gotten to a point where some Republicans are saying that the real enemy of democracy is over-regulation. What is your view about that?
My view when relating to regulation is, what I always tell people is regulation has to be rigid. Yes, but it has to be flexible at the same time. Because when regulation is too rigid, it doesn't allow companies to expand and grow. Yes, it has to be flexible in the sense that, as a company, when you are launching a new product, your regulation has to be moving at a pace that is quick enough to allow you to jump into the market. As you know, we're a global village right now. Yeah, as Botswana here, we're not that separated from what is happening in the US. So over-regulation and too much bureaucratic red tape, as one of your hosts mentioned.
My guests, yeah.
Yes, one of your guests mentioned, can be a stumbling block, really. So regulation has to be in place, has to be followed, but it has to be allowed room for movement.
According to that particular guest, we are hanging on to a playbook from the British, which is long outdated. In fact, he's saying the British have moved on, but we're hanging on to bureaucratic red tape that they inherited from the British.
Yeah.
What do you say about that?
Yeah, the Karl Marx of things.
Yes, in a sense.
Yes.
What do you say about that?
I agree with him wholeheartedly. Yes. But as I have already put it, regulation is quite important also. Yes, but it shouldn't be too rigid.
Okay.
Yes.
So in terms of decision making in an organization, what is the hierarchy? Where do you place the risk officer or the risk management officer?
Yes, in terms of the hierarchy in an organization, the risk is seen as an advisory role. Yes. It's mostly, you'd find that across the finance department, under the finance department, whereby what we do as risk officers, we advise management on what they should be doing on the high priority risk areas that they should be taking action on. Yes.
And so are they? It's not a separate department as such.
No, I wouldn't say it's a separate department. Yes.
So is it enough? I'm just trying to picture it. Is it just enough to employ one individual and it's enough in terms of an organization, or it depends on size?
Depending on the size and the complexity of the organization, one individual may not be enough. Yes. If the organization is mostly operating in, for example, the financial sector, you're going to need someone who has to be a risk analyst, maybe analyzing just the market on how in terms of their performance. Yes. And you're also going to have someone who's in operations. So you might find yourself having a need for an operational risk manager and someone who's strictly just focusing on finance.
Does the risk officer also policing against things like pilferage, theft, and risks associated with that?
Yes. The primary focus of risk management is to be a guard, against fraud, against human error. As you know right now, we're in the 21st century. There have been many cases of cyber theft. There have been many cases of corruption. So as a risk officer, you have to make sure that you help the organization to guard against those events. Yes, by continuously monitoring, continuously making risk assessments, then reporting to your superiors so that they can make a better informed decision.
So in that context, what would you say is the biggest challenges facing risk managers today?
The biggest challenge, we have the obvious one, COVID. COVID brought about a huge array of risks. As you know, organizations have had many disruptions in terms of their supply chains. One example that I can give is those in the agri sector. We found that the price of certain commodities such as your fertilizers, your dicalcium, the prices increased rapidly in a matter of 3 years. So as an organization, you have to find that you're in a position where you have to see how you can best combat such a situation, especially if your business model relies on procuring goods and assets from abroad. Yes.
Is there anything you want to share from your own personal experience where really this function of risk management mattered, where you made a difference?
The first difference that I really made, was when I was working as an operational risk assistant. For one of the parastatals here. At the time, the organization was undergoing migration from the normal, storage facility. We were moving from that normal storage facility to cloud computing. And during that phase, we were working closely hand in hand with the legal department, with the IT department. Yes. And I managed to pick up that one of the, how can I say this?
Officers?
No. One of the technological license that we were using. The render. Yes, because we were using a company that was based in USA. But unfortunately, the company was not licensed to sell us the technology that they were using. So working hand in hand with the legal
and they had
the
been
IT
supplying
department.
you for some time.
Yes, for years. For years. And that was a huge issue because it meant that the rightful owner could rightfully sue us and sue the company. So because we managed to see that problem before it went any further, we managed to talk to the rightful owners, the legal department, then we canceled the contract, then did everything on board, onboarded the new rightful owners of the technology.
How were you tricked into that situation? How did you fall into that trap?
I think it's something that has happened with many organizations, not just here in Botswana, even in the US, even in Europe. Yes. Organizations that didn't really fully encompass what risk management is all about. As I've said, risk management is a tool in which you have to continuously monitor your activities. It's not a box-ticking measure. What I've seen with most organizations is they view risk as a box-ticking measure. Like as a KYC, I think you all are aware of KYC.
Every year, Same documents all
same
over
documents.
again.
Is this, does the person have the rightful address? Risk management is more than that.
We're always being asked to resubmit our certificate of incorporation.
Yes.
As if it would have changed over 12 months.
Yes. And risk you have to continuously monitor. Whenever there's a change, you have to continuously monitor that change.
Yes.
So you find yourself that if you don't fully carry out all those processes on a regular basis, you might fail to monitor just the subtle little thing. Yes.
But isn't there also a risk from a rogue supplier where, as you've said, you ended up terminating the example you gave?
Yes.
Can they cause a ruckus if you've signed an agreement? They would argue, wouldn't they, that you ought to have known or you knew you had time to investigate, but you have an agreement with them. Can they enforce the agreement?
It depends on the legality of it all. Yes, it depends on the legality of it all. Because in the first instance, they were selling technology that didn't belong to them. Yes, so that's the first problem. But in terms of what you've mentioned a really important issue of, suppliers maybe in terms of what you happen seeing, like in fraud. One example that I can give is in relating to COVID. I think we saw that many companies here in Africa and in Asia, they were supplied with PPEs from companies that were not licensed to give out those PPEs. Even worse, some vaccines, you find that our neighbor here was supplied with vaccines that were
expired.
Yeah, already expired. So that on its own, it's a risk management concern also.
What would a risk manager have done to avoid this situation?
A risk management to avoid such a situation would have analyzed each and every process that goes into procurement. Yes, like I've said, risk management works as an advisory role. It works hand in hand with procurement. It works hand in hand with finance, from each and every department, from top to level.
If a whole country can be,
can be tricked, or
I didn't want to use the word trick. Can be thrown into that situation. What more an average company? It shows that the threat is really serious, and surprising that companies still, countries still fall for these questionable suppliers.
Yeah, it's something that is really worrying, really. And it's not a new phenomenon. As you can recall, what happened back then in 2008 with the whole global crisis. It's not each and every company or each and every bank, that fell for what happened in 2008. There are certain people or certain banks that came off better off than what other companies did. And what those certain companies did is they managed to foretell the risk before it actually took place. As you know, what happened, it was the global
the crisis,
the global property crisis.
The meltdown.
Yeah, the global meltdown. But there are certain individuals who managed to pick certain, what can I say, certain signs that something was about to happen. And what they did, they approached their head of finance department, their credit departments, and told them that, all of these mortgages that we have in our portfolio, we should make sure that we get rid of them as soon as possible. Yes, and those companies that managed to do that, they managed to stay afloat even after the crisis.
They were not impacted.
Yes, they were not
negatively
impacted.
Yeah.
Yes.
Coming back to here in Botswana, is there any particular situation where you can say, look, a lack of risk management really led to this? Can you think of a situation that has happened that to us here in Botswana?
Yes. I can think of several, in fact.
Yeah, give us two, maybe.
Okay, I think we're all aware of what happened in the banking industry. Yes, in a certain large bank. I don't think I should...
Don't mention names,
I cannot mention any names. Yes, it was a case in which the employees who were working under the credit department, they embezzled funds to one of their partners who was working outside of the company. Yes. I think around $200,000 was gone.
And it's local.
And it's a local thing, yes. And the most common one, the one that happened with government. Yes.
What happened there with government? I have lost track a bit.
No, the largest corruption case that we had, in terms of the company that was in charge of cushioning our fuel prices. Yes.
I'm not familiar with the full facts there. Are you able to share?
The full facts?
Or some of
I'm
the
not sure if I can share the full facts if you're allowed.
You can, as long as you don't single out individuals.
As long as I don't single out individuals. Yes, I was more specifically referring to the NPF case. Yes.
Yes.
I think that is the largest incident that we had. Yes, whereby corruption was very prominent in our country.
And there were no compliance officers for those companies that were affected?
No, I can't say for sure if there were no compliance officers.
If they were there, they failed to do their work.
If they were there, they didn't monitor something, or sometimes they didn't fail to do their work. Yes, because as I said, we mostly work as advisories. So, for example, if the MD of a company wants to withhold certain information from you, they can do that. Yes, that is why it's important, like for risk management to fully work. The tone has to be set at the top by the management. Yes, there has to be a good organizational culture that encompasses, collectivity and participation. And an organization that does that, you find that they rarely are affected as bad as other organizations that don't really fully encompass what risk management is all about.
Some organizations would have a risk manager, but basically ignore their advice, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, and that's quite common, yes.
It is common here in Botswana.
It is quite common, yes. Not just here in Botswana, but in almost any countries.
So what do you do as a risk manager if your advice is not taken seriously or is disregarded?
There are certain things that we try to do to make sure that risk is taken seriously in organizations. We provide trainings just to make sure that everyone fully understands what risk management is. And we try to show them the value that risk management brings to each and every department. As I've mentioned with the case that happened, whereby the legal department failed to notice that a supplier was not a legitimate supplier. Yes. When certain things happen and they can fully see that, if it wasn't for these people, we wouldn't have noticed this problem. Yes.
What other failures can you share with us where and how can they be avoided?
The failures and risk.
Yes.
The failures and risk that I can quickly mention right now is, is not having onboarding the risk department fully. Yes. And one of those failures is not having a compliance policy that is in place in an organization. You have to have your compliance manual, you have to have your risk assessment manual, and those are the tools that enable you to monitor each and every process that you do on a weekly or on a quarterly basis. Yes, they act as guiding tools, really. Yes.
And how can these be avoided? Does it require somebody like you coming to an organization, speaking to the leadership, alerting them? I mean, how do you go about bringing it to the attention of the powers that be?
Yes, it does require somebody like me. Yes, it does require somebody like me, honestly. And it does require the organization to be proactive in the way that they deal with threats. Yes.
And is it something, looking at the ecosystem here in Botswana, what is the awareness level? How proactive is the leadership of organizations in your judgment?
No, I'd say that the organizations here in Botswana are fairly aware and are fairly proactive. Because we can see that even in government already now we have people who are working in compliance and risk management. Not all companies that have risk managers are obliged by law to have those risk managers. So I can say that, fairly, the situation is improving.
Okay. Now, I want you to relate all this to your personal experience in terms of your observations internally, with specific reference to cybercrime. What is the state of, what is the current situation and what is being done about it?
That was a very interesting question. When we are relating to the issue of cybercrime, as we know, since the inception of COVID, a lot of companies were forced to change their structure in terms of their working environment. You find that more people were working from home, and that meant that as IT professionals, as risk managers, we could not monitor what happens technologically on site. There were many entry points, many threats that could happen from home. You have your devices, and one thing that you may know is that security features when using your home internet are not as strong as using those on site here in the office. So it opened up a whole array of risks. Yeah, there were many cases in people were found that to be exposed to cyber threats, such as fraud, having your identity stolen. I know of a case where people, you'd find that maybe someone is embezzling account funds from your account. You're just at home. When you wake up in the morning, you find a notification that 10,000 has been withdrawn from your account. So you had many cases such as those. So those such cases needed us to make sure that we change our approach into how we manage cyber risks. Yes, we have to make sure that everything now is being computerized, so that you can monitor risk off-site. Even when I'm home, I can make sure that when you are logging on into the company, the company organization or the company site, there have to be certain features that you are using to make sure that those threats are kept at a minimum. And one of those features that you can use, even on your cell phone, there's something called biometric, where you unlock your phone maybe with your finger. Yes. Sometimes you can refer to this as a two-factor authentication. Yes, especially when doing your banking. It may require you to put in a password, then you put in your fingerprint, and maybe ask you further questions to check that are you really this person who's logging in.
I have heard it said that you need to think like a criminal in order to catch one. So I'm just wondering, in this case of somebody taking 10,000 of your money out of the blue when you wake up in the morning, how would they have done it? And in terms of how are they able to remove 10,000 from your account like that?
Okay. Now, one of the things that they do, they look for weak points on how they can steal a person's information. For example, if you don't encrypt your passwords, or you use the same password for banking that you use to log in into Facebook, you know how easily Facebook can be hacked. So automatically that person has your banking password. Your ID, maybe you've lost your ID, or maybe you've shared your password with someone. Like, for example, when you can send someone to go to the bank and withdraw money from me, that person may share your password. So then it becomes quite easy for someone who's a cyber criminalist to steal information from you. Yes.
Cyber criminal indeed.
Yes.
And are there cases where you've managed to catch some of these thugs?
In my profession, there are cases that we've managed to avoid. Yes, we managed to avoid.
But in terms of catching the culprit?
Catching the culprit, what we do is, the moment we notice it, we inform the banks. For example, maybe if there's a client that wants to place an investment with us, there are certain things that we do. Your basic KYCs is just one of the primary defense mechanisms. We have to we have to make sure that where your physical address, everything is in order, and there are certain red signs that you can look for, you can notice. If you're asking someone, okay, can you provide us with your physical residential address? And they're taking long to provide that. Can you provide us with your banking to show us where you do your banking? And
if they take long, it means?
They're probably avoiding certain information. Yes.
It's a red flag.
It's a red flag on its own. Yes. Because if you want to do business with me, I want to come and do business with you, and you tell me that all your papers have to be in order. I have my papers here. Can you put yours on the table? Yes. And then I'm dugging and dodging. It's a red sign on its own. Because you have to know where the source of the funds come from. Yes. And you know that there are certain jurisdictions in the world which are also regulators are shining a spotlight on.
Yeah.
Yes. So when you notice that funds are coming from that side of the country, from that side of the world, it's also a red sign. So there has to be what we call enhanced due diligence when dealing with certain individuals to make sure that really there are no risks that will be involved in the whole process.
Yeah, talking about that, for Botswana, we dodged a bullet. Is it a year or two ago when we were nearly blacklisted? We were grey listed for some time. I wonder whether you believe the threat is over, or there's a risk of us being either grey listed or being blacklisted.
I would say the threat is over right now, but it does creep on its own, because what the Financial Action Task Force, that's the organization that does the whole grey listing. Yes, what they look for is a company, how transparent is it in the way that it conducts business. Because
a country or a company?
A country, no, the country on its own, because the country was the one that was grey listed.
Yeah, yes, okay. Yes. Yeah, you meant to say a country, yes.
Yes, so they monitor certain traits such as those. I think you've noticed that ever since we were removed from the grey listing, companies, in the banking and the insurance industry, they have been more, like enforcing.
More robust
in asking clients to submit their KYCs, to the point that you see certain people, having their accounts frozen when they don't submit those KYCs. Yes. So those are the tools that the FAT looks to monitors to make sure that a company should be placed on the grey listing or should be not placed on the grey listing.
It is really tedious for companies, is it not, for them to keep producing the same information every single year. I mean, they'll ask for things that they already have. Is it a necessary inconvenience for a country and for industry to go through?
It is a necessary inconvenience, because if we didn't go through all those processes, the risk that we face would be much greater than when we would have chosen the alternative. Yes. So I know it's a headache for most of us, just to be always You go from the bank, they ask for this. You go to the company, they ask for the same thing. Yes, but it's unnecessary.
That sometimes they ask for things they already have.
Yeah, sometimes they ask for things they already have.
Most times they ask for things you gave them last year.
Yes. It's a defense mechanism, really. Yes, that we should just learn to live with.
Yeah.
Yes, but we are trying to make sure that things are more flexible. For an example, if maybe it's companies that are in the same industry, as you know, you have your ICTs and whatnot. You don't have to. ICTs, anyone can access it. Any financial institution, they don't have to ask you for the same documents to check that. Are you able to? Are you credit worthy?
Yeah.
Yes.
In order to understand how grave the problem is, sometimes you have to put numbers to the problem. Are you aware of the magnitude of the problem in terms of the millions or billions of pula that are lost, either to cybercrime or to, in a sense, lack of, enforcement of, management of risk or management of compliance? Are you able to put a number to it? How much per year do we lose to this, or we used to lose and now we are losing comparables, things like that?
No, in terms of figures, we are losing billions. Yes, it's possible to lose billions per year. As I've mentioned with one of the biggest cases. No, I don't have exact figures. I can't say. But in the excess of 5 billion. Yes, to cybercrime alone. That's how much we lose per year. Yes. And as you know, with what happened in 2008, it was a global catastrophe. People lost their jobs. They lost their homes.
So in Botswana, it's roughly 5 billion a year?
No, not in Botswana. Globally.
I'm interested in Botswana.
Yes, I don't have the exact figures for our country here.
There is a thought, there's a school of thought that banks, when they have suffered a big blow or a loss, would keep it under wraps so that it doesn't affect their reputation. So I've heard it said that, the problem is much more serious than we think. Just that banks keep quiet about it, because they know the damage to their reputation if they expose these things.
Yes.
What do you say to that?
Banks, like all other listed companies, they have shareholders, they have people who have a stake, a huge interest in how they conduct their business. So certain information can be quite adverse in relation to the image of the organization. So it's a necessary step to do sometimes to withhold such information from the public.
We call it brand management.
Yes, brand management. You know how quickly your share value can drop when a certain negative issue, a certain negative story leaks.
So if it wasn't for that, the public would be, knowing of a much bigger problem than. In other words, what we know now is a fraction of the problem. Am I right?
Yes, internally we may not know what really goes on. We cannot really know what goes on. But regulators, that's why we have regulation. They do know. Yes, to make sure that as the public, our funds are protected, our interests are being protected.
Yeah.
The problem cannot be so bad that we find ourselves in a way why a bank totally, disintegrates. Yes, there are certain defense mechanisms that we have in place.
As you know, for government to acquire anything, it has to go through the process of tender, procurement, and right now the system is sort of in a state of flux, because remember, we're transitioning from one act to another. Can you speak to risk management in the procurement space and help the viewer understand what's going on there?
Yeah, and that's quite a tricky one, really. Yeah, as we know, like the bank is, the government is transforming the whole field of procurement. It's no longer being done by the one board, the PPADB. Like companies, parastatals, and the government bodies will now be doing their own procurement, in-house. On its own, is presenting opportunities and risk at the same time. The opportunities being that now things are going to be done much quicker. There won't be much bureaucratic red tape. Processes are going to be more efficient. But then on its own,
that's the ideal on paper.
That's the ideal on paper. But then on the other hand, it produces its own fair share of risks also. Human nature, like people by our nature, we tend to be greedy. We tend to be self-preservatory thing that we have inside of us. So I know that we're going to have cases of whereby certain individuals may try to embezzle funds, like as we know in the tendering process how it works. But speaking from the risk management point of view, this is now where government has to make sure that it further enhances and further, addresses risks, on its own as a complexity, as a holistic approach. It shouldn't be singled out that there's one specific risk management team, maybe at the government offices, at each and every region. There should be people who are strictly monitoring what happens and what goes on in the tendering and procurement process.
Yeah.
Yes, and there should be also a great idea of visibility and accountability in how everything will be done.
What about the culture of corruption? Newspapers are awash, and certainly in conversations, people are talking that now in Botswana, corruption is a big scourge. In terms of risk management, how do you deal with this scourge? I mean, real or imagined? I think it's real. I don't know what your views are.
No, it's real.
Yeah.
It's real.
What? First, I want to understand how we got into this, and then how we get ourselves out in terms of how we manage our way out of it.
I think one of the reasons why we found ourselves in this problem in the first place, is when you join an organization, maybe you're an accountant, you're in finance, you come up with all these ideas on what you were taught at school, what is the proper way of doing things. Then you find that, upon joining such an organization, things are done differently. You try to report certain issues, then you're told, or no, you know what, hush. Hush. You make sure that also we set you straight. So that becomes the whole culture of the organization, whereby people can just look the other way when certain things are being done that we all know that shouldn't be done. So to address such issues, we should change the entire organizational culture of the organization to make sure that everything is being brought to light and there's a greater degree of accountability. One thing that you've noticed that happens in the West is when something goes wrong, like when huge funds are being embezzled, someone has to take a fall for it.
Yeah.
Yes. But here in Africa, such issues are not that common. Yes. So once we have a greater degree of accountability and transparency in the way things are being done, that's when we can be able to fight corruption. Is that a problem embedded in the culture? Yes, it is.
And how do we deal with that?
It's embedded in the culture.
How do we deal with that?
How to deal with that, I would take back the issue to management. To management and to government. That they should be the ones who are spearheading what should be done. They should be the ones who are singing the song, like praising everything that should be done. Just make sure that everything that you are doing, there's transparency.
Yeah, in that context, I think there's a good place to ask you about the reset agenda, which on paper seems to be an effort to address precisely that. Because the president, when he gave his speech 2 years ago, was complaining about this, culture of complacency, this culture of doing things, and he was proposing a complete sea change in terms of a reset.
Yes.
I wonder to what extent in your field this is beginning to is this beginning to show any results? Is this effective? Is there anything you can say about the reset agenda in terms of how practical it is and how it's working on the ground?
The reset agenda, I think, is highly practical. Yes. Once fully taken on the ground, we're going to see a lot of change in how things are being done. Yes, as I've said, once we as individuals across companies, across governments start being more proactive, for example, having an organization or a department where each and every employee feels the need to fully partake in what the organization's mandate is, to fully report, not reporting in a bad way. Some organizations, employees, you find themselves that they're really suffocated and they can't really approach. You can't really walk into a manager's office and say, what, I have this certain idea. If you can change this thing, maybe you can save 10,000 people per month on this thing. Yes. That is why there's a need for us to be proactive, from top management to middle, even down to the lower workers. So the research agenda, I think, is quite clear.
So are there any tangible signs that you can give that it's beginning to bear fruit?
The tangible signs that I can give is in certain companies. There are certain companies that you can see that they're really striving. Even during the whole course of COVID that we found ourselves in. There's certain companies that even if you look at their financials, they prove that, they were actually not doing that bad. In fact, they made a bit of profit. Yes, because they had the right talent in people management and they had the right culture in terms of risk management. Yes.
Yeah. There are those skeptics who say this is just lip service, this talk of a reset agenda. In fact, I've had guests on this show who said all this is lip service, that when you get behind closed doors, it's more of the same, it's business as usual, nothing is changing.
Yeah.
What is your view on that?
No, in the short run, we can't really fully assess the situation. Yes, we can't really fully assess the situation. I think maybe we are going to notice a change maybe 2 or 3 years from now on. Yes. A year is really too much a short of a time to see things in a broader,
a year and a half
in a broader spectrum. Yes.
Yeah.
But I honestly believe the change will be there.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned of people reporting, I think you are referring to whistleblowers. What is the position of this whistleblower in Botswana in terms of private sector and in government? How protected are they? Because in certain countries they have legislation specifically dealing with whistleblowers. In your field, what have you found?
In terms of how protected is whistleblowers?
Yes. Is there legislation in place? Is there protections in place? Are whistleblowers encouraged to come forward?
Whistleblowers are encouraged to come forward, especially in government. Yes, they are encouraged to come forward. And to make sure that they do come forward, you need to make sure that the identity is hidden. Because the moment we have a case in which a whistleblower's identity is being exposed, no one is going to come forward. Yes.
Yeah, because the tendency is to take matters to court, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And then the court wants witnesses, and witnesses
it wants
are public.
witnesses, and once you show yourself, you are going to be singled out.
And
so I think maybe we need to have more measures that really are aimed at making sure that we safeguard those whistleblowers. Or maybe making mechanisms that whereby the individual doesn't have to present themselves. I don't know how we're going to do that, but maybe I think it should help. Yeah.
I think people in your profession should guide us how we should go about it.
Yes. That's what you should do.
So what guidance are you providing?
The guidance that I would provide that is a mechanism in which the identity of the person is not shown. Yes, until absolutely necessary in the courts.
Okay.
Yes.
What changes, you mentioned COVID a couple of times, what specific changes have been brought up as a result of COVID in terms of risk management?
The challenge that we have faced, I think I've already mentioned one, which was the issue of supply. Yes. But one thing that I've also mentioned I would like to share on is, as much as COVID brought about a fair share of challenges, it also brought about opportunities. Yes. Especially in the fintech industry. The fintech industry is whereby you saw people developing applications in the banking industry. And what happened is, because more and more people were now working from home, we were buying more products online, this presented its own opportunity. People who were involved in the technological sector, they developed those apps to make sure that our
e-commerce area.
E-commerce, yes. I think especially this is more prominent in countries such as Singapore, whereby in 2020 they had a growth of about 3.1%. From to 2021 now, the growth moved on to 6.4%.
Doubled?
It more than doubled in terms of the fintech landscape.
Okay.
Yes. And I think here in Botswana also we're seeing a number of companies also jumping onto the bandwagon. Making sure that the whole customer experience is now fluid in terms of how customers can do their banking at home, can do their shopping at home.
Can you speak a little bit about future prospects for first your field? What do you see unfolding in terms of any significant developments and improvements that are coming in the area of risk management, and of course we're talking about also compliance management?
Yes. The significant improvements that I'll say we've already begun noticing is in the area of ESG. ESG relates to your environment, social and governance related issues. Environment such as the climate. As we know, we're already dealing with a huge climatic change in the world. We're trying as much to do what you can do to reduce CO2 levels. And such change that we have seen in the financial investment sector is whereby companies are now pushing and trying to make sure that they venture into finances or investments that are greener and more friendly to the environment. Yes, and that was in its own also is an opportunity. As a client maybe, or as a business person such as yourselves, an example that I can use is, certain companies would just put a board or maybe a notice outside saying that we sell 100% renewable products, and then that on its own can attract customers for you. Yes, and in our field we've noticed that there are more and more clients who are willing to put their money on finances that are more friendly for the environment. Yes, so that was in its own is a trend and a future trend that I've seen in risk management. And the other one is relating to technology. The world is moving closer than ever before. Everything is at our fingertips now. At our fingertips. So that on its own, we'll find that as risk managers, we need to implore people to be more cyber savvy, to make sure that they are aware of all the risks that they face. The moment that you put your phone on, you're opening yourself to a wide array of risks.
Okay.
Yes.
One of the questions I like asking relates to the value of perseverance, the value of persistence, the value of grit, and it's something that we want to promote, especially in this show. So in dealing with that, I want to ask you whether you've had a significant setback in your career or in your life, and how you handled it.
The setbacks that I face, really, I think most of us, we face them on a daily basis. You'd find that in most cases, being qualified is not the only thing that is really going to make sure that you get through the door. You have to, sometimes in certain fields, you have to work extra hard. Yes, you have to extra work extra hard. One example that I can give is, I'm really thankful for the people that I work with right now, for giving me the opportunity that they have given me. I applied for an interview. The first time that I applied for that interview, I didn't make it, and then they called me back, I think, several months later. So that on its own, I'd say, we as potential employees, we shouldn't really give up. The way the industry is set up,
the setback was unemployment, right?
The setback was unemployment. Unemployment, and in terms of the growth, how you want to progress. Maybe you have 5 years working in the same field and you hope to progress. You find somebody is being hired, you train that person, and then that person surpasses you. You shouldn't let that be something that demotivates you. Yes.
Are there any prospects for your field in terms of entrepreneurship, in terms of the private sector? Is there scope for forming your own compliance institution or company and getting work?
There is, because our neighbor here in South Africa, they already have their risk management governing body. Yes, and it's something that I hope we too here in Botswana, we can have a governing body for risk and compliance managers, whereby people can be licensed and entrepreneurs and the companies can pull talent from those people. The field is fairly new, but not that new, and I'm hoping that eventually it will grow into something that really would make a change.
In terms of future prospects, speaking about yourself particularly, what is the crystal ball telling you about the next 10, 15, 20 years?
The next 5 years, I would really love to see myself working into ESG, as I've already mentioned. Yes, because I believe that is where the risk management field is heading towards. The current trend is going to be around even for many, many years to come.
Doing what specifically?
More specifically, managing risk in terms of the investment that clients make. You come to us as a client, you want to place an investment that is more green friendly, that is more proactive in terms of making sure that we curb problems that we have been addressing, such as your bureaucratic red tapes, your corruption issues. I would really love to be proactive and play a key role in that field. Yes.
In other words, you'll be showing your clients how to avoid some of those challenges.
Yes, how to avoid those challenges and making money at the same time while avoiding those challenges.
So we will have a company incorporated, perhaps having offices across the subcontinent?
Yes, the consultants.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's exciting. As we conclude our time together, this is your chance to ask me a question if you have one.
The question that I have for you is, what is your experience in terms of risk management, like in your organizations across the Mogobe Incorporated spectrum? And is it something that you see could be of benefit to your company?
Based on our conversation, I think it can be, because in the past it's been more a case of trial and error, especially error, where you catch somebody in the act and you fire them, catching them red-handed, and we do try to put systems in place because we have auditors who are coming to audit constantly. We have both an internal auditor, as in our finance manager, and external auditors who come once a year.
Yes.
But listening to you, there might be need for someone on a more permanent basis. Listening to you, there might be need for perhaps some trainings, some workshops in terms of raising awareness on the field. But as you said, it's a fairly new field, and it's something worth considering going forward for the future.
Yes. Yeah,
okay. Look at that camera, sir, and have a word with that viewer who's watching you, in terms of leaving them with one motivational snippet, one message.
Okay. I think the last message that I can give is more of a question, really, as to why does a car have brakes? I want to relate that to risk management. Why does a car have brakes? One could think that maybe the reason why a car has brakes is to make sure that there are no collisions or you don't hit anything, you're safeguarding your life. But in terms of risk, we view a car having brakes as allowing it to move faster. Because you have brakes, you can move at higher speeds. So in the field of risk management, we are the brakes, but not the brakes in terms of to stop you from progressing. By a car being able to move at higher speeds, it means your company having a proper risk management organization or proper risk management culture in place allows that company to maneuver across curves, to move much quicker with more efficiency. So I'd like us to view risk management as a tool that really enhances instead of tries to stumbles or fights progress. We do not fight progress, yes.
You encourage progress.
Yes, we encourage progress. So in all of our lives, as we mentioned when you started this interview, risk management is part of our lives, from the moment that you wake up to the moment that you go to sleep. So let's continue managing our risks in order to be more efficient in our lives, in order to form more stronger connections with those that we work with, not just in our professional lives, but also in our personal lives.
Okay. Can you share with them all your contact details in case they want your services or your advice? Yes.
My contact details, my email address is Mphoentle Rangaka @gmail.com. My number or WhatsApp, you can contact me on 77089943.
Okay. There's nothing on social media?
Social media, I'm on LinkedIn, Mphoentle Rangaka. Facebook is also Mphoentle Rangaka.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
All right.